Man, how about that JTE, man?
Great guest. I'm glad that he wants to come back so soon.
Yeah, me too. I really enjoyed our time together, and I'm kind of looking forward to being better friends in the future. Because again, this is the first time that both of us have ever talked to him, right?
Yeah, I've never talked to him before.
Like I mentioned earlier, I mean, I sort of always felt this sort of connection to JTE in that way because he went from a fan to working under this umbrella, and yeah, I just thought that was something we had in common, and it's really cool, and I totally think it's bogus for people to give him shit based on what he's done for himself, because I give him all the credit in the world for accomplishing what he's accomplished. So
Like I said, he is a legend in the Schmoes Know lore.
that's right.
He's a character that will live on forever. He could be their Beetlejuice if we want to keep the Howard Stern comparisons going.
You were on your way to writing a textbook about this person, so I'm on board with that for sure.
Is that my history lesson you're referring
Oh
to?
yeah. Great job on that, by the way. I had no idea what to expect. Right now, this is becoming a recap of our recap of our recap. Okay, so let's get into the more traditional part of the Schmoeville podcast. The JTE block was great, but now let's get into sort of our Collider talk for the week. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to discuss here, mainly with the fact that this was John Campea's first week back to Movie Talk.
Yeah, he really didn't miss a beat whatsoever. It felt like old times again. Really, the thing that stuck out to me, like we discussed last week, was that the hosting situation appears to be clear at this point. Ashley hosted Monday through Wednesday, Sinead hosted Thursday and Friday. Natasha was not on the schedule this week, so John had previously implied that he might be making a change in that department. And based on the first week, it seems that Natasha will likely be doing Collider News from this point on, maybe Mailbag, but I didn't get a chance to watch any Collider News this week. Was she even on Collider News this week?
I didn't watch a whole lot of it, but I do know that Natasha did some of it this week.
Okay, so it looks like our assumption is correct that she is now doing Collider News stuff exclusively, perhaps Mailbag. We haven't watched Mailbag since we're recording when Mailbag usually drops, but I think John wanted to go with his trusted host that he hired before his first exit.
Which is interesting because John actually said it wouldn't happen immediately. And if we're to go off of what happened this week, then it sort of did. So I don't know. Maybe that was something that was activated quicker than originally planned. So yeah. But overall, dude, I mean, I feel really good about Movie Talk being under Campea again. I mean, this is sort of the show that I fell in love with in the first place. This is what brought me into this space, period. Was John Campea on Movie Talk. I'm glad it's back. I think it's interesting, again, and I spoke on this before, I think it's interesting what he's deciding to change, because ultimately I wouldn't have thought that the changes like the shit rats or the windy cam, all that stuff, I never would have thought that it made that big of a difference moving forward as far as getting consistent viewership and, you know, the main reasons why Campea is back. So I'm finding all of that interesting, maybe even unnecessary, but overall I'm just glad we're back with Campea.
Yeah, I said last week that if John was still at Movie Talk this entire time, that the Wendy Cam never would have happened. So I was curious to see how he was going to handle that. And of course, they've gotten rid of the chat room section where they see what's going on in the chat room, even read some comments. And now they have Wendy look up the Twitter questions in advance and read them off instead of giving us a chat room update. So I actually think that works better, just because in some cases, the hosts, they kind of scramble to find a good Twitter question at the main desk. In this case, Wendy is locked and loaded with a Twitter question already picked out for when the segment comes back to her.
Yeah, the only thing that I find interesting about that is that Campea is starting to sign off with the show, and maybe he's done it a little bit in the past, but I picked up on it this week. He's saying that the most important part of the show is the viewership's reaction to the stories. So
Right.
it kind of goes against his idea to get rid of the Wendy Cam and the fan response. So I find that weird.
Yeah.
Also, don't think they really did a good job explaining that if Wendy's going to be locked and loaded, it seems that people need to get their Twitter questions in even earlier. Like, when I've participated in the Twitter questions, I've done it when the segment starts, and at the earliest, maybe when they're reading mailbag.
They've always said if you want to get your question on, send it even sooner than that. Not just when they tell you.
I've always done it that way. I've gotten a couple questions on, but I didn't think they did a good job getting across that maybe people need to be ready for the Twitter questions.
But yeah, it is a contradiction that John would take out the chat room update and then say how much they prioritize viewer engagement and what the viewers have to say. But overall, it's not a make or break issue for me.
It's really not. I mean, it's more for the sake of the discussion of it all that we're talking. I mean, again, it doesn't really, those are the things that I don't really like or dislike. It's just, I'm fine with it. And if they decide to get rid of it, then I'm fine with that too. It's not really a big deal.
And based on our own comment section in our YouTube video area from last week, people were saying like we were against Natasha, that we wanted her off the show, yet we were basing everything that we were saying on what John had said in his Facebook Live. So it's not like we were trying to get Natasha off the show. John had suggested that a change was coming, yet some people reacted like we were trying to drive her off the show.
Well, I did say that I feel like she doesn't really contribute or doesn't even know what they're talking about for the most part. I mean, I still feel that way, but her job is also to just read the stories, and she can do that very well. I mean, she's a great on-camera personality, but I also want some contribution, and I think that's what makes Sinead stand out, is Sinead is confident when they go to her and ask her about a movie, and I don't think Natasha is that. So that's why I prefer her the least, talking about these three hosts. So
a lot of people agreed with me though that Natasha's pageant history probably plays a part in why she's not able to engage off the cuff like Ashley and Sinead can. And practically speaking though, you just don't need 3 hosts to cover 5 episodes per week.
You really don't.
That's overkill.
So I agree with that. Another thing that Campea contributes to Collider now are his movie reviews. So, that's something that's actually been missing from Collider. You'd think that Collider would have consistent movie reviews every week like the Schmoes did. And beforehand, it was more of like a panel of people discussing the movie, but it was always usually a major release.
Which they'll still do. They'll still do those too.
For sure. But it wasn't something that I felt was consistently happening with their channel. So if Campea is going to do this for every movie that comes out like the Schmoes do, and then they'll get the panels for the big discussions, I really like that idea. Or do both, because you can have one review that's like 5 minutes, that's John Campea's, but then do like a spoiler discussion of the same movie with panels and make it a little bit more long form. So
absolutely,
I think they're going to go down that road, and I really like that idea. So
when John started doing these quick reviews on his personal YouTube channel, it just never made sense to me why he wasn't doing them on the Collider feed instead, because if you help grow Collider, everybody wins. Everybody benefits from the trickle-down effect. So as of a couple weeks ago, he started experimenting with putting his quick reviews up, and it's working great, I think. And their subscriber totals have gone up in a short amount of time. I don't have the exact numbers, but I noticed a rather substantial increase from when we last checked. But Collider needed to have their own Jeremy Johns, their own Chris Stuckman within their feed. And John can easily fulfill that role, similar to how Christian and Mark do quick reviews on the Schmoes Know feed. So this is absolutely the best way to go.
And the other thing that makes total sense for Campea's reviews on the channel is that he's vocally said that the John Campea podcast and his YouTube channel are purely a hobby. So he's not like a struggling YouTuber that needs to get his YouTube channel to a specific point. He's going to make money off of it. So I'm sure it wasn't a huge decision to move his reviews to Collider, but it was also a really great decision to make. But
he started putting effort into them. He got a green screen. He got some graphics. He started putting some actual effort into them, and it just made no sense that he would be doing them for his hobby channel when you can do them for Collider and help everybody else when he's still affiliated with Collider, and he was at the time, because Complex owns Collider. Complex and Collider produce Film HQ. It's just, if you help the mother channel grow, everybody grows as a result.
I agree completely, 100%.
Also, I want to follow up my issue with the top comments last week. This was something that I brought up in regards to how the Schmoes Know Q&A worked. They basically took
Do you want to talk about that now or during Schmoes Know?
I want to talk about it now just because I ran an experiment in regards to Campea's Sully review.
Okay.
So it crosses both, but I saw that the Sully quick review had been posted by John, and I was one of the first couple people to leave a comment. And I did this to prove my point from last week. So I left just an average comment. Hey, I think it's great that your reviews are on the Collider feed. Keep up the good work. Welcome back. Something to that effect. And sure enough, because I was one of the first people to comment, this thing had about 54 upvotes, and it was holding down the top spot for quite a while. So that's basically my issue with going with the top comments approach to selecting questions, is that it's not necessarily rewarding the top comments in terms of quality. It's rewarding the comments that were there first, which had the most exposure and which had the most time to be upvoted. So like I said, if you scroll down that list in the Schmoes Q&A, you'll find a ton of great questions, but because they weren't posted from the get-go, they had no chance of being found and upvoted for people to see. So that's basically my issue with the top comments algorithm. It's not foolproof is my point.
So this week in particular, we had a holiday on Monday. So even on regular weeks, sometimes I have issues cramming in all the content. Did you like it? Like, do you like when all of this is crammed within 4 days and you get all the Monday content into Tuesday? Is that a better viewing experience or a worse viewer experience?
Obviously, I would prefer to have a full week, but I don't want them to just skip a show entirely because of the holiday week. So, yeah, there's less time to watch the same amount of shows, but I don't want to just skip out on TV talk just because there was a holiday on Monday. So, certain things I haven't watched in full yet. I'm still behind on the BVS Ultimate Commentary, but just watch that this weekend. So ideally, it's too much content to watch in 4 days, but I'd rather cram than have to skip a show entirely or have them skip a show.
I agree. In no way am I arguing that they should have just worked on Monday. That's not what I'm arguing. I'm just wondering if it's a little bit troubling.
It's daunting.
Yeah, right. But no, I agree. I don't want to see a show like TV, because usually holidays are on Mondays or Fridays, and those are the days that are going to get skipped. So I don't want TV Talk to always be the one that gets pushed off of the week. So I'm glad that they still recover themselves, especially when Tuesday is my slow day anyway, because I don't really watch Nightmares. So, but TV Talk was weird because we had Perry on instead of Sasha, and I don't know. I kind of, for some reason, this week's TV Talk it's not as memorable as the other weeks. Like, I kind of don't even remember watching it.
Look, I've been quite vocal that SPR is my favorite woman on this channel, as well as Schmoes. I mean, she just brings so much energy. She brings a strong opinion, even if you don't agree with everything she has to say. She adds something that I cannot stop watching. So, yeah, this week's TV Talk, nothing against Perry, but it did not have me glued from start to finish like they usually do, just because Sasha's a wild card, kind of like Makuha. You never know what they're going to do, what they're going to say. So yeah, I just did not enjoy TV Talk like I usually do. Let me ask you, did you finish the BVS commentary, or are you even going to watch it?
I started it a little bit just to see who was on it, but I don't feel like watching that movie again. And I've done it in the past before. In the past, I have only watched the commentary, and I haven't even had the movie along because I just liked listening to them talk about the movie. But it's just because it's Batman v Superman. Like, I don't even want to go through that anymore because I've already watched it more than I've wanted to this year. I've seen it 4 times, and I don't even think the movie's that good. So I'm kind of over it right now. Maybe give me some time. I might go back and watch it, but that is not on the docket anytime soon. So,
But you've seen the ultimate cut already, though, right?
yes, I have seen the ultimate cut.
See, I watch it again. I still have a half hour left, but I watch it just because I want to see John Schnepp add his little insight into the comic book verse that I don't know. He knows so much history about the comics and the characters that I learned things from him. Much like you learned things from John Roca and Matt Nost on the Top 10 show, I learned things from John Schnepp on these commentaries, just like I learned things from Kid Christian on these Star Wars commentaries. I also wanted to see John Campea describe certain scenes because I've always felt that he has a fondness for this movie that goes beyond what he has said on the record. So I think he likes this movie more than he lets on. He just has to temper what he says a bit just because it's such a polarizing film. And if you watch his commentary, he's super into this film, almost to the degree of Man of Steel. When you watch that commentary, he's so passionate about that film. And of course, he likes that film more than BVS, but the way he was talking about BVS implies to me that he's got a greater degree of affection for this film than he may let on.
Sure. And yeah, he's always been very vocal about how he likes it more than most people, so I'm sure he would give...
But he understands why other people have issues with it.
Exactly. And people can learn a lot from that ideology.
He's been saying that a lot lately. I like Suicide Squad, but I can understand why some people had issues with it.
Before we move on to top 10 real quick, did you want to address how Makuha is rushing everyone, but he will stop to talk about Pittsburgh on TV Talk?
There was a hilarious moment, I don't know if it was this week's TV Talk, it may have been last week's, where he tells Sinead, all right, Sinead, we got to be quick. We don't have a lot of time here. Rapid fire, whatever that segment's called. And so she starts going, and then he stops her to talk about this squirrel story from when he was in college. So he doesn't mind stopping the show when they're supposed to be quick to tell a long story about a squirrel in someone's backpack in college, but everybody else has to be quick with their point. So just a weird thing. And someone called him out on it. He replied, tried to brush it off, but people do notice these things, not just us.
Right. And it's funny because I've always jokingly made fun of Makuha and how the only thing out of his mouth, it just has to be, he can only talk about things that involve Pittsburgh. And I find that hilarious. And of course, Ellis addresses that on the live show, and we'll talk about that soon. But I thought that was worth bringing up at least. To quickly go over top 10, for one, I thought it was weird because we've had this discussion about language and Roca is throwing out GD and stuff at the top. And I don't know if you noticed it. I did. By the way, Makuha was even scared about cussing on TV Talk. So I just think this is a really weird thing, and I'd love to get some more perspective on what's going on with this because
he was worried about Dennis because they went over a certain number of words that they could get away with before the video becomes flagged by YouTube, whatever that means. I tried to find some guidelines explaining this, but there was nothing definitive about what that means. And when I tried to look up TV Talk, I didn't see anything that would designate a flag or that the video had been flagged for language. So maybe it's something internally that they have to deal with, but I couldn't tell any difference just by looking at the video and its data.
But not only do I think it's bullshit that YouTube would have some kind of regulation like that, but I don't care how much they cuss. Like, they don't need to just go nuts and be like sausage party. I mean, that's not what I'm defending. It's just, I don't want them to feel neutered. And I don't want them to slip up and be like, oh my gosh, I cussed. I'm sorry. Like, I don't think about it at all. And now they're making me think about it. So I thought it was such a harmless thing, but now it's just kind of, I think it's lame on YouTube's part, not on their part. So, but anyway, so to talk about top 10, Roca didn't like that Nost was explaining the show this week. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
I just thought it was a strange point to make because for some people that have never seen the top 10 show, it's not the easiest of formats to understand if you're a new viewer. So I'm sure that Dennis and company have said to explain the format before every show just because you don't know who's watching. Yet Roka was so upset that he has to explain the format every episode, or that Matt has to explain the format every episode, that he starts belly aching about it. And then Nos calls him out for how he belly aches about this every week. So I just think Roka's got to remember that he's not speaking to his long-term podcast audience that have been with the show forever. They have to address the new fans that just discovered it via Collider Video.
And that is a strength of Mark and Christian's. Their incredible patience with people online. That I don't know how they do it, because I've talked about this before. When sometimes I see Christian quote tweets and answer questions, and sometimes it's probably the 1,000th time he has had to answer that question, and he never makes the person feel dumb for asking it. And even I find myself making fun of the person at first, because I'm like, how do you not know that? But you just then I have to take myself back a little bit and realize, yes, I know what punting is. The first time I ever even heard that term, I think we actually stole it for Film Beef. And this was before I had ever even seen the top 10, and my co-host Phil had, and we used that same format for what we were doing at the time. And it was very, in my opinion, very easy to pick up on, but that doesn't mean that you should not take the 30 seconds out of your show to explain it to people. And clearly people are asking for it because they make a point to mention how if you're not in the United States, you probably don't even know what punting is. So it's like, if you're already aware that you need to explain it, then why are you going to try to go back on it? So I don't know.
And he's not even the one explaining it.
Exactly. So I think that is a strength of Christian and Mark's, the guys that have been around in this space a little bit longer. But I mean, for me, I don't need the explanation, but there are plenty of people that do. So
let me just say, this was the first time that I gave the top 10 show a chance in recent weeks. I'm well documented about my issues with it and how they don't engage fans on their top 10 lists as much as they should, something that the 7fave hashtag proved. I won't go over that again.
Thank you.
But in this case, it took me out of the show hearing Roka belly aching about this. I just turned the video off. I was gonna watch it, but that turned me off right there. And I was watching Friday Movie Talk, which had Roka and Nost on it as well. And I was just looking at the comments out of curiosity. And there's a lot of people that are not too pleased with Roka of late. I'm not going to call Roka out, but I think maybe he's got to kind of look at his attitude objectively and see if he can kind of improve it to some degree, because we're not the only ones that are saying these things, or at least observing these things.
I didn't see the comments. I'll have to go back and watch it. And I watched a little bit of Friday's Movie Talk. It was sort of in and out, and I was doing other things. So I guess I didn't get the full grasp as to what was going on. But my last point about Movie Talk, well, it came from Movie Talk, but this is a question I had for you. I didn't realize that they had this show when it was AMC Movie News. I didn't realize that they had a show called Rewind, which is essentially the Wednesday segment.
Yeah.
So I support a show like Top 10. I think Collider needs more of that. So would you support this Rewind concept coming back?
I've always liked the show, but I don't think they'll ever do it just because it was a failure at AMC, just like their AMCI channel was a failure. That was dedicated to everything independent film. You had Amy Rose, you had Alicia, you had great people doing that show every week, and yet nobody watched that either. So John Campea, I know he's only in charge of Movie Talk, but I don't think they're going to revisit things that did not work previously, including the Rewind show.
Okay, I mean, fair enough. Again, you know better than I do because I didn't even know the show existed, but it's something that I would appreciate or something that I would like to see. So maybe if the channel gets a little bit bigger, because where are we on the threshold? Like, how big was AMC's YouTube channel and compared to what Collider is now?
They had just crossed the 300,000 subscriber mark. They were around like 302. So they're almost back to the mark where
Okay.
the transition or the merger that happened
Okay.
when Campea quit the first time.
Well, I would like to see maybe if the channel grows, maybe another attempt at that type of show. I'd be really curious.
They had Alicia Malone on their channel doing multiple shows, and when the merger happened, she got cut. They lost a huge talent who's gone on to such great things since she had to leave unceremoniously. She didn't even get a goodbye show to say goodbye to her fans. And now she's doing stuff with Screen Junkies full time. She's a correspondent for 20 other channels. So that really cost them one of the best film reporters going right now,
Fair enough. Well,
unfortunately.
you know, whatever's best in the channel, but again, it's something that I would like to see. So our comments section on YouTube would be a perfect place for you to voice your opinion. If you'd like to see the show Rewind come back, let me know. Let me know why not. Whatever. Sound off in the comments section. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
And let me clarify, AMCI, Rewind, all of these shows, on top of not being as popular or even half as popular as Movie Talk, Jedi Council, Heroes, it was simply a matter of budget. They could not afford to keep those shows going. They could not afford to keep Alicia on staff. So it was a tough decision, don't get me wrong. One more thing regarding Collider before we transition to the Schmoes Know live show. I really, really need them to make a new tag video where Ashley comes in at the end of every video, telling people to like the video, telling them to subscribe. The first issue is they turn the volume up way too loud compared to the video that you've just watched. So it's super abrasive, it's super jarring. So either way, they need to do something new there that is updated, because they recorded that thing probably the first week of the merger. And it's time to get a fresh take on that isn't upped in volume.
The Collider intro that I put before this podcast is always much louder than everything. Like, it's always clipping in the red. And at this, I just quit including the audio. Like, it just starts with our theme music because it's so obnoxious. So I don't know, maybe an update on all fronts with that kind of stuff too. And that even translates into the, again, Copster's breaks, all the footage that he shows, the movie talk and the T-Public commercial and all that stuff. I feel like all of that needs to be done. So
especially with John back as the showrunner of Movie Talk, they need a new advertisement with Kid Christian and Campea. So that needs an update sorely. But am I alone in thinking that the Ashley tag video is just so abrasive and jarring?
I've only noticed that she says the word channel weird, and that's always bugged me.
Yeah.
But
I mean, she's talking super loud, but the volume that these settings are set to inherently is way up than usual.
I would like to see, just the blanket statement, I would like to see all of those types of videos, those plugs, changed just to update them all. So
do the little square thing where you've got the little square where they're talking, maybe mix up the people every month or so, every couple months, and then point them to several other videos. Don't just do one general tag that goes at the end of every video. Get a bit more involved, like Mark and Christian do on the Schmoes channel, where they have one video that's telling people to go to this video, that video, or to the T-Public website.
Well, that's a good point. It's a good point. Are you ready to go into the live show recap?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. This was Schmoes Know Show number 249, the summer movie recap. And, we're coming up on 250, by the way. So I haven't heard any chatter about if they're going to do anything to celebrate this pivotal point in the Schmoes Know Show history. But I'd like to see something fun happen for sure. Christian's original plan, for what he told me anyway, was that it was going to be an all Q&A episode, maybe. But obviously they have already done that. So this was a summer movie recap. And
maybe they'll save their special plans for episode 251, which we'll explain later in the show. So hold that thought.
Okay, I will hold it. Yeah, summer movie recap. I just felt like this was a tired discussion, like bringing this up in general, right? I mean, and I'm not really talking about the segment itself yet, just when I saw what the show was going to be about. It didn't really get me that excited. What about you?
Yeah, some of these summer movie thoughts we've heard a million times already. We don't need to hear the criticisms of Suicide Squad any longer, but luckily they kept that segment as abbreviated as possible, and the good part about it was it led to some hilarious moments, especially the RB3, he's tired of seeing dicks in movies, and how
Right.
people misinterpreted what he meant. Obviously, he meant just jerks, a-holes, etc. But that gave Ellis material for the rest of the episode. It allowed for some hilarious moments regardless, but really the highlight for me in this episode was Glickman, Stephen Kramer Glickman. I know his name, I wasn't familiar with his work. Before we get to that in detail, though, we had a great Brett to the Future. This is a really solid show, and I'm always concerned when Christian goes on vacation, even though they've got so many great people that can fill his place. I'm always worried because he is the leader of the show. Let's not mince words here. This is Christian's show. He's the leader. But when he's been on vacation of late, especially last year, Max Landis was on, and that was a wonderful show. That was one of the best interviews they've ever done. So
I've seen that show. I've seen that episode.
it's great. And I felt this episode was great as well. I was really pleased with it, regardless of the summer movie issue. Ellis, my only issue with Ellis as host is that sometimes he doesn't have the mic close enough to his mouth. So he sounds a bit distant at times.
I did pick up on that, but Ellis is usually louder than everybody, so maybe that's
He
why.
corrected it at some point, but in the beginning, he was not close to it whatsoever. And if you go back, you'll be able to see it. But this was an interesting episode because we've got Tiffany, Brett, and Riley at the main table with Ellis. Tiffany was back this week, and yet we had no Sasha, no Finstock, no JTE. Miri was off camera for the 5th time in 7 weeks, even though she was there producing. So what did you think of the variety of people that they had this episode?
This was a really weird episode. Like, I have very mixed feelings about it. For one, did someone last week in our YouTube comments say that we don't talk about Ellis enough?
Yeah, but then I pointed out multiple times where both of us praised Ellis for certain moments. I always quote some of his best lines, like his Tom Cruise Scientology zinger from the Q&A episode. So that's just not true.
Well, let me say that I kind of see what they're saying a little bit, because I feel like that Ellis is the one who's just like consistently on his mark. Whereas like Christian can elevate in levels. Sometimes he gets bored or tired or feels like he's lost control, and then that's something we can talk about on the show, right? Or Christian is getting pissed about something and then we talk about that, or Makuha says something stupid and we talk about that. Ellis is just always the same for the most part. He's always like he's always great support for everyone else, but as far as like standing out, he doesn't really do anything in particular to where we worthy of bringing up on the show. And I'm not speaking to his quality. Like, he's always consistently good, but he also just always does one thing, which is go off of what someone else has said and make a joke. So I think it's just the way his presence is laid out in the show. It just doesn't really, with our style on the show, the recapping and like who's done what, Ellis just never really comes up. So I actually kind of see what the person is saying. But again, I don't think it speaks at all to the quality of his contribution to the show. But I actually kind of thought, yeah, maybe we do talk about Ellis the least.
Well, I go back and I look at my notes and I pinpoint multiple quotes from Ellis. But yeah, to your point, he's so even-keeled. He doesn't lose his temper all that often. He doesn't get loud when he gets excited. He's always the same level, and yet he's dishing out these hilarious jokes left and right, where guys like Makuha, he has to dress flashy. He has to get loud when he wants attention. So there's very different approaches by each person on this panel, where Mark Ellis is just same energy level the entire time, but what he's saying, if you listen to the words that he's saying so much without having to be loud in the process.
And I've said it before. I think that Ellis is the better host when it comes to like Collider programming, but I think Christian is the best host when it comes to the live show. But with that being said, yes, it is weird without a doubt when Christian isn't there, and people were going nuts because I didn't even know that he went on vacation. Because I was asking him a couple questions, and he's like, I don't know. He had no idea what was going on this week on Collider because he was on vacation. Like, he was totally out of the loop.
He did announce this for the record.
Yeah, but I know, but I'm just saying I didn't know.
No, I know, but I'm just saying he did clarify in advance he wouldn't be here, etc.
But so many people didn't know that. So it was funny watching so many people go nuts in the YouTube chat last night. But
you know what? He said it during the Collider Facebook Live, and I don't think you watched that.
No, I didn't.
So maybe that's why you didn't know in advance. But
right.
He's definitely the better of the two when it comes to hosting Schmoes. I haven't really focused on that in regards to Collider, and now that Campea is back, it's a moot point who's the better host. But I think he's definitely the better driver of the show when it comes to Schmoes. But Mark is certainly capable, and the show had a different feel with Mark at the helm. And it was an interesting mix this episode. And what concerns me, though, typically absences are explained. We knew that Sasha would miss last week. We knew that she would miss TV Talk this week. We didn't know she would miss this week's Schmoes as well.
Right.
So this is an unexplained absence, and given my time with this channel, with this network, unexplained absences are usually trouble. So I'm paranoid for some reason that Sasha may not be a regular on this show anymore. Maybe even TV Talk too. I mean, I've known for a while, everyone's known for a while that Screen Junkies has this kind of mystery project going with Roth Cornett. Maybe she recruited Sasha to help her out, but something just doesn't feel right to me about Sasha's latest absence. And it could be nothing, it could be me just being paranoid, like I said, but I'm really concerned that my favorite woman on the show may not be on the show any longer.
We've talked constantly about how we feel Sasha's presence on the show and how great it is. And we've talked about it before when she hasn't been on the show. Like, it really felt like something was missing. For some reason, this episode, it didn't really hit as hard because it involved Riley being on the main table for the first time, which is something that I've been asking for weeks. I felt like maybe he still didn't get enough time on the main table. Like, it really wasn't about him as much. And it's probably due to the fact that Brett to the Future was amazing this week, by the way.
Well, Brett in general was amazing. Brett got more time to speak than he usually does. And the best part about all of this is that he wasn't interrupted like he's usually interrupted.
I know, and that's what's funny. And I thought that we could talk about this as a series of points. I don't know if you have anything prepared, but I wanted to talk about all the things that were different because Christian didn't host. And I thought that since Christian was gone, it allowed for the single-handedly best Brett to the Future segment too. So did anything else stick out that was great or abnormally weird that Christian wasn't there, or was overall the rest of it pretty consistent?
Well, look, you had less people there. You had no Christian, no Sasha, no JT, no Finstock. Regardless, there were less people to interrupt him. Obviously, I love Sasha, but she is known to interrupt Brett during his segment. But in this case, he was able to get his segment out in full as he had planned, and it was great. But he was great the entire time he was up there. But definitely the best Brett to the Future thus far.
And it was the first 0 he's ever given, correct?
Yeah.
So I think he was really into it, and everybody else was really into it as well.
His pluralized bit about the Civil Wars and how he added a plural to all these films, that killed me. That absolutely killed me.
What did you think about Makuha this week? Because this is the first week that he's been back since his quote-unquote suspension.
Yeah, he's finally off suspension. It's awfully coincidental that he was back the week Christian was gone, so I can't wait to see their dynamic once Christian is back.
Christian finds out Makuha was on the show, and he's super pissed.
Hey, it's possible. You never know.
For some reason, though, and again, I love Makuha, I wasn't feeling him this week. I just thought he was like some random side guy. Like, this week he reminded me of that one guy that tags along in your friends group and no one really invited him. And he's always making, like, the last remark to the conversation you have with your friends. Like,
Right.
yeah, I know, right? Like, just the guy that kind of goes along with everything. For some reason, I just wasn't feeling Makuha this week. I don't know what it is.
Well, here's the thing. Remember how I said Mark is usually even keel and he'll dish out like 2 or 3 quick jokes without people even realizing it because he's not acting loud while doing it? This week, with Glickman in the house, Glickman obviously commands a lot of attention himself. I felt like Josh felt a bit left out, and that's what led to moments like the following. So I'm about to read exactly what Josh said after Glickman told his Annie breaking a leg story. So bear with me for a moment as I read this. Josh chimes in. He interrupts to get this point out. Tiffany was talking as he interrupted. He interrupts with the following. We're all forgetting about the true life story of Home Alone 2, where they're singing the solo, and singing the solo, and then Biff, and then Buzz is behind him. It's a true story. Buzz is behind him, playing the things, and he turns around, and then they have the family child call him a trout sniffer. That ended a show. It was a chorus concert. That's literally the exact transcription of what he said after Glickman told his story. That is what he had to interrupt the conversation with. And that led to 2 of Ellis's best jokes in a long time. Ellis says verbatim, I think Makuha should just chime in when a film has been shot in Pittsburgh, because until this point, he had been hyping Pittsburgh in regards to where Me and Earl and the Dying Girl was shot, which was Pittsburgh. And then, not to be outdone, Ellis then follows that up with, you were the Annie breaking her leg of this show, because Glickman had just got done telling that story where the performer as Annie in some play, I don't know when this was, maybe as a child or coming up in LA, the person playing Annie broke her leg. And so Mark just timed it perfectly as if to say that Makuha just stopped the show with a broken leg like Annie did. So great jokes from Ellis, but yeah, Makuha is going out of his way to get attention, and I did not feel him at all in this episode either.
Interesting. Okay. Maybe something's going on over there with Makuha. He's a little rusty since he's been off, so.
Right. It's the suspension rust. I totally get it.
One complaint that I saw a lot, and this, going back to Ellis a little bit, is the amount of commercials that the Schmoes Know Live show has now. Do you have any particular stance on this? I don't know if they really need this many. I mean, I'm not gonna protest that they just stop commercials altogether, but it just seems like there's one around every corner, and maybe it's just excessive.
I've been meaning to bring this up for several weeks, but the commercials and ads have increased twofold. There's far more ad reads than there used to be, and the segments are getting long too. I mean, they will spend a good 3 minutes on a certain plug. So it's not just Gentle Giant, it's all these multiple, half a dozen companies now that they're plugging. And I get it, you've got to monetize the show, but there comes a point where it's a bit much. And I think the current amount is a bit too much.
How are we going to argue with how they make money, Because that's all they have to say, right? If we argue that point, hey, maybe it's excessive, then they can just say, well, it makes us money, so we're not going to stop. So, and then you're just at a standstill.
I'd rather have a show with ads than no show at all. So how about Ellis's hilarious Junior Mitch story?
It was a little Seinfeldian, but I liked it. And maybe that's why I liked it, because it reminded me so much of Seinfeld. And then I think it was either Ellis or Brett that brought it up, that was Seinfeldish. But, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Seinfeld, so.
But I love the debate, though, whether the box was full or not. Ellis insists the box was full and that despite a full box, she didn't offer him any. And I don't know. I love arguments about nothing, like Seinfeld. So for me, that was an enjoyable moment.
We talked briefly about Glickman. Here's basically my thoughts on it. I love Stephen Kramer Glickman in this light. So a couple years ago, I actually saw him on Big Time Rush. I was watching a show accidentally, by the way.
What is that?
Okay, he was on a TV show called Big Time Rush on Nickelodeon, and the TV show was about a boy band. Like an actual boy band had a show on Nickelodeon. And he played, it was fictionalized. It wasn't documentary style or anything. It was a scripted show about this boy band. And he played their like manager or producer or whatever. And again, this is before I even know who he is, before I know that he has ties to Schmoes, because this was years ago that I saw this. And he was flat out annoying. And this speaks to Nickelodeon programming in general, live action, is that their humor now is just people yelling everything. Like, that's all it is. So this guy, that's all he did was just yell, because that's what Nickelodeon was and maybe is still to today. But again, so I like him much more as Stephen Kramer Glickman on the show, because I loved actually hearing him talk about storks. And it's funny because I gave Ellis shit a couple weeks ago saying that I don't believe for a second that he's supporting this movie. But his interview with Glickman this week made me rally behind this guy. And I think everyone is excited for him more than they are for the movie, because I think it's really cool. It's a really great story about how he came to be in this movie, how he got all of his parts, how they ended up keeping him around, how his name is on the poster. All of that is really cool. And I can totally get behind that. So I'm super glad he came on. And I was also really excited to hear about his show, or his new podcast that he does at the Comedy Store, I believe he said. Because right away I looked it up as a podcast, and I can't wait to start listening to it.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of late night television. Like, I'm a huge Letterman fan, obviously. If anyone out there knows how much I love Letterman and miss Letterman. Conan, like, I love late night TV, and the fact that he does this kind of talk show, I was super excited about it. So I'll send you the link when we're done here.
I love the spoiler alert joke. That was hilarious. I mean, so many great moments in this show, and I don't know if all these great moments could happen if you've got more people on this episode. I mean, you brought this up before when you've showed Schmoes to some of your friends. They've felt that there are too many people talking at once, and sometimes when you have that many people, it's unavoidable. Usually Christian reins everybody in as well as he can. But when you have less people like this episode, it allows more of these moments to happen.
I agree. I've obviously said it before. I feel like everyone got their turn this week, and that was a strength to the episode. One thing that I'll say about the spoiler alert, though, is that I'm someone who watches, I don't know if I've said this before on the show. I know I've thought it a lot, but I have a complaint because the spoiler alert tag does absolutely nothing for someone who watches this on Xbox. Or PlayStation.
Well, it was a joke version using it. They added it as a joke in this case.
Oh, I'm not talking about that instance. I'm talking about what the spoiler alert tag in general is. Okay. And when you watch it on Xbox, your controller dies. So whenever they put up the spoiler alert, it's way too late for me to stop the video, because I have to turn on my controller and hit pause. So that's really aggravating for people who watch it on a console. Just a heads up. I don't know if anybody else feels that way about it. But yeah, no, I agree. It was a funny moment.
Let's talk about the news.
It was great.
Ken had a line about audience expectations being the biggest opponent or enemy of a certain story or movie. And it was so relevant and timely because Tiffany had just gone on a rant during the summer movie section about how everybody's favorite films were films that nobody had pre-existing expectations for, like they did Suicide Squad, like they did Resurgence. And I actually agree with her a great deal, because it's kind of true that we like the movies that we know the least about or have the least amount of expectations. But Ken just happened to chime in with this audience expectation joke that killed me for some reason, because it's so true that is the biggest enemy of most of these studios. So that's just a random inconsequential point, but I wanted to give props to Ken for that. Let me ask you about the timestamps that they're now putting in the videos. I think they're great. What about you?
It doesn't really matter to me either way, just because I watched the live show in its entirety for this podcast. So for me, it doesn't affect me, and they also end up breaking up the segments. So I guess there are a few people that probably appreciate it, but I don't think it was absolutely necessary for them to do. But I mean, plenty of podcasts do this, and sometimes it is helpful to me. So plenty of people are going to totally be on board for this. Probably a smart move overall.
When I do research for this podcast, it's especially helpful in my case.
There you go. That's a good point. And you don't always watch the live show live, do you? You're like a little bit behind usually.
I record film schlubs at that moment in time, so I catch the show around 9 p.m. Pacific until I go to bed. So yeah, it's helpful for me.
Yeah, but you have to watch the show anyway, though? Like the entire show?
I watch the entire show all the way through the first time, but when I go back to rewatch certain segments, like Makuga's Home Alone 2 rant, the timestamps are incredibly helpful.
Good point, because I usually just take notes as I go, so I don't usually end up going back to watch something unless it's like absolutely ridiculous and I need to replay it. So, but anyway, yeah, it's probably a smart move for sure. The last thing I want to touch on really is that Ellis has been teasing this huge announcement. The part that I find particularly interesting, because I obviously don't live in New York, so his stand-up show there isn't going to affect me in any way. But what I think affects everyone is that this is leading into him performing another hour-long special. And I've been saying this for a while, that Get to the Castle is like 4 years old now, I believe. And not that it's bad, but I'm ready just because I'm a fan of Ellis' stand-up. I'm ready for another one. So I'm super excited for that, and I hope everyone else is too. You haven't heard Ellis do stand-up, have you?
I haven't, and I've never listened to Get to the Castle, which I'm going to go do that after this show. It's time I give it a listen, but yeah, he's doing an hour at, I believe, the New York Comedy Club as a warm-up for an hour special that he'll be recording.
Right. I definitely suggest Get to the Castle. It's on Spotify if you have Spotify in its entirety. And to anyone else out there who hasn't heard Get to the Castle, there you go. So go check it out.
I wish he could do a video of this upcoming special. That would be cool.
Well, did he imply that, or was it just going to be audio?
I felt like it may have been a video special as well. I mean, I don't expect it to be on Netflix like the big guys out there, but Ellis, that would be great to see him in a video format, a video special, regardless of who airs it.
For sure. And I guess we do need to go back. We were just making fun of the timestamps, but we probably need to go back and make sure to clarify if that was going to be a video or not. But from what I understood it was only going to be audible, I think.
Actually, he may have said we're not recording this one, but it's a warm-up for it. I have a feeling it's video, but I could be wrong. We'll correct ourselves next week. I want to ask you real quick, the JTE 30 for 30 spoof. I think they're going to do many more of these, given how successful this trailer has been. And you could do these, I mean, they're doing these obviously for the Schmoedown, but you can take advantage of the entire Schmoedown's history, dating back to Blue Fairy, dating back to Broderick. These are references that you may not know, but fans of the show will know. So I think they're going to keep this 30 for 30 trend going. And I think it's an excellent idea to build more content around the Schmoedown. And I know you're on board with that as well, correct?
Absolutely. And I was talking about this when they announced the sketch comedy series that they were going to be doing, because originally I thought maybe they're going to get Copster and the guys to produce this stuff, and we've learned since then that it's not going to be them. But I've always thought, hey, they have this team of filmmakers, amateur indie filmmakers, whatever you want to call them, behind the scenes. So this was always a great idea. And I don't think it's just going to stop at the 30 for 30s. I think this is going to lead to other things where, it could be like something like The Decision, something that's sort of produced for the Schmoes Know live show can have this supplemental viral hit with it. Right. So I think that it's not going to stop at 30 for 30s. And I cannot wait to see all this stuff, because it's not, I haven't seen a lot of that from them, the sort of scripted sketch stuff, aside from what they did with grasping at straws, which isn't even really a Schmoes Know thing. It was done aside from it, and is sort of swallowed up in the whole Christian Harloff, Mark Ellis universe. So, but yeah,
Cobster and Cody and JTE used to make some stuff. They've got that zombie video that they made.
I have seen the zombie. You're right.
But with RB3 though, they've got filmmakers on staff that can put stuff together like this, and they've got comedians on staff that can write great stuff. So I want more of this, and I think we're going to get more of it.
I think that overall, this was another good week. It wasn't just a standout episode, really, for me, but, I was happy with it for the most part. So, do you have any final thoughts on the week that was, or are you ready to get out of here?
Yeah, I want to make a quick announcement as it was given to us before the show, but you mentioned, are they going to commemorate episode 250? Well, I don't know what the answer is to that, but I do know for episode 251 that Katie Sackhoff is returning on September 22nd. And since she's the one who started the show with Mark and Christian, I think that they are going to do kind of a retrospective when she returns, and that'll be their 250 celebration in a way. I could be wrong, but I think they'll use her appearance to celebrate how far they've come. And she's been due for a return for a while, so I can't wait to see her.
And in my research of the show that I've done in the past, going back to listen to other episodes of the Knapsack Files, things that I've gone back to, Katie Sackhoff obviously plays this huge pivotal role in their history. I've learned a lot about her. I'm really excited for her to come back, and maybe they'll reminisce and stuff too. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's a really exciting time right now, so I can't wait.
She'll be promoting Rebels and Longmire once again, I'm sure.
That's right, yeah. She's in Rebels Season 3. That's really cool. And I asked Christian, because I'm not caught up in Rebels, so hopefully Christian remembers to ask her this. But I want him to ask if Rebels is a part of this Netflix Disney deal, because I'm hoping that I can catch up on Rebels through Netflix. So
I've never seen it, so I hope so too.
I've only seen Season 1, so I need to see Season 2, and hopefully it's on Netflix. But anyway, that's all I got, man. This has been an action-packed episode. I still can't decide. I might even split this up. I mean, it's 2 hours long, so we'll see. You guys will know either way, and I hope everyone loved this episode. I hope everyone appreciated having JTE on, because I thought he was a great guest. He was a great sport. So, yeah, overall, very happy with this week.
Likewise, I enjoyed this one a great deal, even if no one else does.
Where can the people find you online, Brian Davids?
You guys can follow me, Brian Davids, that's Brian with an I, on Twitter at BDF331. Check out my TV film podcast at Film Schlubs, or wherever podcasts are found. You can also find older episodes at filmschlubspodcast.com. There I talk TV and film with various co-hosts and conduct interviews with industry folks like Better Call Saul showrunner Peter Gould or Ray Seahorn, who plays Kim on Better Call Saul. So coming up, I've got Melissa Bernstein, who's the executive producer behind Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Halt and Catch Fire, and Rectify.
Awesome. Can't wait to hear all that stuff, Brian.
Thanks.
I'm Ryan Snelling. You can find me online at Film Beef Snell. That's my Twitter handle. And you can also find my podcast, Film Beef, wherever podcasts are found, or on the Film Beef YouTube channel. We have weekly movie reviews, TV recaps, never before seen retrospective episodes on movies. A lot of fun stuff, so please hang out with me over there. There were a couple people that came over to my channel from Schmoeville and commented at how weird it is to see me in person, well, not in person, but what I look like, and then talking about movies since I'm handcuffed on this podcast. But anyway, thank you so much for all those people who engage with me weekly, and I greatly appreciate it. So with that being said, we will see you next week celebrating number 250. Bye, guys.